Hello, I'm Kathryn Delaney, and this is your astrological snapshot for September 17th, 2020. We have a new moon happening today. It actually happened earlier this morning. The new moon is in Virgo. Virgo itself is a sign that is ruled by the planet of Mercury and the element of Earth. So it's a very practical minded sign, very forward thinking. So it's usually associated with preventative health, uh, critical thinking, assimilation of information, because it has that combination of Mercury, which is, how we look at things and see things and speak about things, with the earth element, which is always practical and resourceful. So that kind of energy is within the new moon. And new moons, as I was saying this morning in our daily tarot reading, new moons are interesting because they're basically opportunities to put energy towards new things that we want to build in our life. What's happening in the actual like galaxy is the moon is in conjunction with the sun, so we don't actually see the reflection of the moon. And when it grows, in what we see, it's actually waxing, much like a candle waxes, right? It's growing in light, and then when it's in 180 degrees perspective from the sun is when it's actually in a full moon. So we won't have Virgo in a full moon for 6 months. So it's interesting to see that like whatever we're creating right now will actually be seeing truly manifested in 6 months time. And what I'd like to talk about today and what my goal is today is to give you a little bit more perspective on how this new moon might be affecting you personally. So as everyone knows, there are 12 zodiac signs, and when you're born, you have your sun in a specific zodiac sign, which basically means that your sun, when you were born, the sun was in the time that the zodiac was in, that 30-day period of time, right? Because the year is broken down into 12 months, and usually zodiacs start around the 21st, 22nd of the month and go to the next month, 21st, 22nd of the month, and there's 12 of them. So if you're born within that cycle of that zodiac sign, that would be your sun sign. So if, me, for instance, I was born on October 26th, so I was born at the very beginning of Scorpio. But I also I have a Virgo rising. So when I was born, the day that I was born, that morning the sun was rising at a certain degree, and it was in Virgo, which placed my sun in the chart in a certain placement, and all of the planets in my chart in that wheel in a certain placement. So if you were to look at your natal chart, kind of like a clock, uh, the there would be 12, or pie, there'd be 12 pieces of that pie, and each different piece represents a different piece of who you are. And depending on what planets are in those areas, it can reflect what's going on in your life. And what happens right now is that we have, planets that are constantly in motion, so they can transit our natal planets. So what I'm going to do today is show you the current chart, which I grabbed off of astro.com, also called astrodynst.com, and I just searched for current or current transits, current astrological transits, and it gave me the placement of degree of transits, and then I clicked on chart, and it gave me the chart that I'm going to show you right now. So this is where all of the planets are right now in the sky, in the geocentric perspective. And by geocentric, I just mean that from the Earth's perspective, because if if we're sitting on the Earth and we look out, this is where all the planets are placed. Whereas if we were on the sun, it would be a heliocentric perspective, and some of these might look differently. in as far as like their placement just by perspective. So most astrology is based on geocentric astrology because we live on the planet Earth. And so this is where the other planets are in association to where we are. So you'll see that there's this grouping up here. If you can see the arrow that I have, there's this grouping up here of Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter. And that's pretty significant because these planets are all really slow moving planets. And so, for instance, Saturn takes 29.5 years to move around the entire zodiac system. Pluto takes 248 years to move around the entire system. And Jupiter, this one over here, takes 12 years. So they move at very different speeds, right? We know that from like the models that we saw in science class as kids that had the planets placed in their orbits from the sun, and we could see how far out Pluto was in perspective to where the other planets were. And so that's why Pluto has such a long orbit, right? Because it's like way out here and it takes a really long time to move around, even though it's not a perfect circular orbit, it's kind of an elliptical orbit. But so the fact that these three planets are together is pretty significant. And we see oftentimes when these planets are together, big shifts in the global scale. And so that's a side note that we can talk about in later recordings, but it's just something that I wanted to mention right now. So like these are all in Capricorn. They've been in Capricorn for a while. They were in conjunction in stellium in Capricorn with a couple other planetary bodies in January, which actually January 12th, which is when a lot of the chaos started in all of our worlds. And Saturn's starting to move out of Capricorn, but these planets are in retrograde. We also have some other planets in retrograde. These three planets, which are all very big planets, we have the planet of responsibility, which is Saturn, the planet of transformation, which is Pluto, and the planet of generosity and help, which is, Jupiter. And that like adds big energy to things. It enlarges things and expands things. And so we have this very big, like, if you were to see it as like a circular seesaw almost, like there was kind of like this big tilt of energy. And there really is, like, if you look at it from a heliocentric perspective right now, like everything is being tilted like on one big side. So we're literally experiencing a shift, a magnetic shift of sorts, a shift in energy just because all the planets are on one side of this circle from a heliocentric perspective. But from our perspective, and what I wanted to talk to you all about today is where the new moon is and where it's going to be affecting you in your life. So on this chart, it shows Aries over here in its natural house, which is the first house. And so we have, 12 different zodiac signs out here on the outer circle. And then they have their natural rulership of houses. But when you or I were born, we likely have a different rising sign over here because everything is in motion. And so for me personally, I have Virgo over here, right? I have Virgo in this house. So I have a Virgo rising. You may have a Taurus rising. You may have a Gemini rising, and you may have any of these rising signs regardless of what your sun sign is. And the reason why it's important to know what your ascendant is or your rising sign is because it actually tells you where all of the other like where the house placements are. So for instance, let's see if I can look here. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can somehow pull up my own chart to show you what I'm talking about. So you can, this is a really great site. You can go in here and use a lot of their different services, search for, you know, your own natal chart. And so what you can do is go down here and it will have, it's actually probably in Astrology, free horoscope, natal chart, ascendant, give me back that sign, natal, or chart, extended chart, ascendant, but I'll just do natal chart, ascendant. But I guess, so this actually already has my birthday up here. So you can see, like, when I was born, I had Virgo over here, and I had all of these planets over here. And I had Jupiter up here and Saturn over here. And this is where all of the planets were placed when I was born. If I want to see what's cool in the extended chart selection is that you can see where the current transits are for you as well. As my friend up there as my partner, that's interesting. Geocentric, so you can choose heliocentric, geocentric, chart type. You can choose natal chart with transits. Hopefully it's just doing it for me. Yeah, okay. So you see my natal chart here, right? And you see where the transits are here on the outside. I can't make that smaller. That sucks. Make it smaller. No, not that, silly goose. Well, that's not what I wanted to do. Are you gonna let me? Okay. All right. It's gonna give me a little bit of a headache. You can see like where these planets are on the outside, and that's where the transits are, like where the planets currently are. And this on the inside are where my current chart, like where my natal chart was, like where the planets were when I was born. And so you can see, like, for instance, this moon, it just finished transiting my first house, and it was a new moon, and the sun are in conjunction here. So this is affecting my first house, and my first house, and anyone's house or anyone's first house who has a Virgo rising, is, you know, who you are, how you see yourself, what your reputation is. Having a Virgo rising is associated with, like, you know, preventative health, being wellness minded, being very, you can have like the side, you know, the I guess the fault of sometimes being self-critical. Not that any of us don't have that problem, right? But you know, and obviously I have other influences because I have planets here too. But in the fact that I have the Virgo new moon sitting there, I'm having an opportunity to start something new in the area of my first house, and like create new routines in the area of my first house. And that's everyone with a Virgo rising. You know, a new routines, new ways of seeing yourself, new ways that other people see you, like really big shifts in how you see your life. And because there's also that grouping in the fifth house, which is associated with, you know, new love affairs and creativity. You know, there's some energy going on there as well. But for other people, we can just walk through the different houses. So, and the different rising signs, for instance. So if you have a, let's see, we just did the Virgo rising sign. So if you have like a Libra rising sign, that would put Virgo in your 12th house. So you could be experiencing like new ways to have like dealing with like some of your addictions, because like the 12th house can deal with like skeletons in the closet, things that we kind of have buried, things that we need to dissolve and like um, process before we can like move forward with things in life. It's also like our most spiritual connection to God or to like the higher power, higher self. And so you have Virgo naturally sitting in this house. So you are very practical about how you um, go about things. Like you might, actually be approaching like how do you combat some kind of addiction, or have even like a new routine and process with meditation and kind of going deeper into yourself and exploring into yourself. If you have a Scorpio rising, that would put Virgo in your 11th house. And so, the 11th house is naturally ruled by Aquarius, and our sense of like our friendships and our long range aims and ideas. And so you could actually be like making strategic steps to some really long range like ideas and like things that you've been wanting to do, and making practical steps toward it. And this new moon is literally like you are having a, a sense of like how you can see those things like coming about, um, and things, new directions that you want to go, and maybe like things that you also need to let go of so that you have time to go in the directions that you want to go in as well. If you have a Sagittarius rising, that would put Virgo in your 10th house. The 10th house is, our house, or our sense of achievement in life, and our sense of like what we go out and do in the world, our life path, um, our reputation in the larger sense of the public, like our career. And so you could actually be, making new steps towards like taking new steps toward, a new career, or, refining refining how you go about doing things in your career and in your job, like new strategies of how to go about things and how to think through things and how to accomplish things in a more efficient manner. And new ideas with new projects that you want to actually work to, that you'll actually see truly manifest in like 6 months time. If you have uh, a Capricorn rising, that would put the Virgo energy in your 11th house by your natal chart. And so the new moon there is like the ninth house is all about like your higher sense of learning, and it's influenced by Jupiter, and like your higher search for spiritual understanding and your higher sense of self. And so having, you know, a new moon in that area in Virgo is kind of like bringing practical steps towards maybe taking efforts towards like even maybe teaching something, or learning something new in a like not like an elementary way, but like a bigger like uh, like master's education or more refined education than what you've already done, because the ninth house is also associated with higher education. It's also associated with big business, and so you could be taking practical steps towards like making a business or an endeavor that you're doing, um, analyzing it to see how you can be more efficient and move forward in other projects. If you have an Aquarius rising, that would put the Virgo energy in your 8th house. And, the 8th house is associated with Scorpio naturally. So it's a fixed water ruled house, and it rules over like our partner's money, because the second house is typically like our money. So the eighth house is the second house of the seventh house, if that makes sense. So it would be like your partner's money or your partner's value system. It's also like your uh, relationship with sex and intimacy in a passionate way, as well as uh, our relationship with recreational drugs, our relationships. Like my teacher, when I apprenticed with him, would always be like, "It's sex, drugs, and rock and roll." Like that's the eighth house. It's like a lot of stuff that gets uh, not spoken about, which is why like Scorpio is associated with like a lot of secretive energy, because it's like taboo subjects are usually associated with Scorpio, because they can be deeper individuals and very mysterious individuals. And so the eighth house can be mysterious. But it can also speak to, sex and relationships and sex and relationships with uh, you know, recreation of different varieties. And having a new moon here could be, speaking to like, Virgo is very much like a preventative, health oriented, like wellness oriented sign. And having a new moon here can bring like a fresh new start to that house and that energy. And you may be looking at some of your behaviors and some of your habits to see if it's actually really bringing you the value and the joy and like what you want out of life and out of those relationships and out of those activities. Like you could be like, putting a critical eye to them and like looking at them with your little monocle a little bit more, and just analyzing them under a new way. And you know that of course there's other planets affecting that too. So I mean that would put the whole like conjunction, for instance, of the Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn in the 12th house for that person who has the Aquarius rising. So, there's a lot of stuff that's around behaviors that are like being transformed and looked at as far as like what does it mean to be responsible around like how I use my body, and also with like loans, because it's other people's money. It can also refer to like how do you practically like handle loans and like strategically pay off loans and stuff like that. Um, for Pisces rising, that would put the Virgo energy in the seventh house, um, right? Yeah, because I just did eighth house. So that would put the Virgo energy in the seventh house. And so for Pisces rising, there can be uh, some sense of like really looking at and analyzing relationships and partnerships and one-on-one relationships, whether they're business relationships or like really close relationships like friendships. The seventh house is usually like your one-on-one long-term relationships or your business partnerships or your like closest circle of friends. um, and it's also like how we see ourselves, because it's the seventh house, so it's like self-reflection. And so having Virgo in this house, there can also there can be like a lot of criticism around the partner and also around the self and around like self-reflection. So this you may be looking at how you actually look at yourself, if that makes sense, and seeing if it's useful. Like if I don't know if you're familiar with there was a popular movie a while ago. It was like What the Bleep Do We Know? And it referenced this one scientist, Dr. Mazuro Emoto, who would photograph droplets of water that had been frozen and capture the um, the different crystalline structures that would form in it. And what he did when he was doing that is he was trying to show us like, okay, well, um, what I say to this water totally changes the structure of what this water crystal looks like, right? And so this girl was going through the movie, and that was like something that she observed, and it gave her this moment of self-reflection because she started realizing that how she was speaking to herself was possibly like affecting her like mentally and physically and emotionally, because she would do like negative self-talk, right? And so instead, like what she did as like a way to combat that is she started drawing hearts and like pictures of beautiful things all over her body as like a ceremony to love herself and to give herself love. Um, so I think, you know, this someone who has a Pisces rising could have like a natural way of being very like self-critical or even critical of their partners. And so you could also turn that and see it as like an observation. And if it's actually useful, and actually make a shift in that way, and you know, make a practice in that way, if that makes sense. If you have a Aries rising, that would put the Virgo energy in your sixth house, and the sixth house is related to our work environment. It's also related to preventative health. It's small groups and also like small pets. So having a new moon in this house, there could be something new starting in, you know, that realm, like a new job or a new position in your job is starting, or an idea of what you want to do and what shifts you want to make in your job could start, you know, coming in, if that makes sense, because the vision is here. It's not necessarily like actualized until like the full moon. Like we have a full moon in 2 weeks, but the full moon that's actually in Virgo isn't for another 6 months. So some things that we're like seeding into the universe right now aren't truly going to be manifest until like 6 months from now. That makes sense. And it, you know, when you consider how many planets are actually in retrograde right now, like that actually makes a lot of sense. So, but we can go more into that later. I just want to talk about the new moon right now. Um, but you know, for the folks that have a Aries rising, as I was saying, the Virgo is in their sixth house, so you may be experiencing like a new plan to have like a new routine around like health and like how you take care of yourself, and like maybe different foods that you're eating and things like that. If you have a Taurus rising, that would put the Virgo energy in your fifth house. And so there might have been a new relationship that has started or is starting that you're starting to look at and really analyze if it's something that's what you want. And it could also be, you know, a new beginning around like um, a creative project that you want to do, because the fifth house is all about like creation, and like it's ruled by the heart, and it's fixed fire energy. So there's like a lot of like stirring fire, stirring emotions around the heart, around like passion, um, but not from like a sexual sense, more from like a heart sense and like creation. And there could also be things happening around like new routines around dealing with children, because the fifth house is ruled by children as well. Um, for those folks who have their Taurus rising. Now, if you have a Gemini rising, that puts the Virgo energy in your fourth house. And so the new moon in the fourth house is, you know, looking at how things are done at home, maybe new routines around how you do things at home, um, you know, looking at how you might have a way to organize the day differently. The fourth house is also rules like our tribe and our like family, and our relationship with our mom. And so there may be some inspirations in those areas too, as far as like things that we want to move towards and things that we want to manifest and build on. And so now would be a really good time to plant those seeds out, like in the universe, you know, as far as like uh, things that you want to manifest and see come about. Now, if you have a Cancer rising, that puts Virgo in the third house. And so, you know, Virgo in the third house would be an interesting combination, because the third house is already ruled by Mercury, and is ruled by Mercury as well. But the third house is, its natural zodiac sign is Gemini, so it's like communications and matters around children, and how we speak to each other, and how we reach out to other people. And so, having a new moon here, you may start looking at like how you interact with people and communicate with people. If your email list has gotten a little out of hand, and if you can maybe come up with a new way of getting that under control, like by organizing it in a new way or having a new strategy around that. And like having a day of the week maybe that you reach out to people if you're feeling, like you need more social interaction, or you need to talk to people more. Like, what kind of strategies can you come up with? Now is a good time to come up with that. The people who have a Leo rising, they have the Virgo naturally in the second house. And so the second house is like the money that we have on hand, as well as our belief systems and our physical body, all of those things. And so having a new moon in this area in Virgo could mean that, there's a new strategy or planning, or a wish to improve on an area around like how you take care of the physical body, and how you like deal with your actual like money that you have on hand. Like, maybe if you're spending money a lot, how can you like not spend as much money, or buy things more in an economical package so that you can save money, or make sure you keep your food properly so you don't have as much food waste, things like that. And like how you can actually like have new strategies around possibly even like building how much money you are able to create and have on hand, and take care of that money. So that's a walk through like every one of the rising signs, just where the new moon is. Now, of course, like where the planets are for each of those rising signs is going to make a huge difference. And where your personal planets are, and where our current transits, like how they actually affect your personal planets, will make a huge difference in how the astrological transits play out in your personal life. But just to, again, take a look at this chart here. Oh, that's not the one that I wanted. I wanted the other one. Let's look at this one. Yeah, this is the one I wanted. So if we look at this, we have these three planets, the planets of responsibility, transformation, and generosity, or like something that like builds energy, sitting in Capricorn. They're all, I believe, retrograde right now, maybe with the exception of Jupiter. Jupiter is in retrograde. I think it just got out of retrograde. And then they're in square, which is why this is a little red line. Squares are 90 degrees, right? Because there's 360 degrees here. And so every 90 degrees, if planets are in 90 degrees, it's considered a square. If they're in a 120-degree relationship with a planet, it's considered a trine, because it's considered an easier energy to work with, and the squares are considered more friction, or opportunities, character building opportunities, as my teacher used to say. The squares are character building opportunities. And so Mars right now is in square to these three planets, which are also in square to Mercury. And the moon and the sun are actually in trine relationship, because they're both in an earth sign, right? Because there's 4 different signs. There's earth, there's water, there's air, and there's fire. And there's 3 of each, so you have 12 signs. So whenever something is, in all earth or all fire or all water or all air, they would be considered in a trine relationship. And if they're in a square relationship, they're in a 90-degree relationship. So we have a lot of different energy going on right now astrologically. And how that would play out in your life really depends on where your rising sign is and where these planets sit on your personal wheel, if that makes sense. So if you're interested in looking at that, reach out to me at rootsofalchemy@gmail.com and we will look at that. I also give tarot readings that are done in an astrological layout. So there are 12 card readings, and in the beginning of those, I always look at the transits that are happening for that individual. So if you're interested in that as well, please reach out to me at rootsofalchemy.com. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please let me know. If you want me to create more videos like this, or if you like this video, I'd really appreciate it. I do daily tarot readings, and this is my first time doing an astrological snapshot. So just so you know a little bit about me, I did apprentice with someone for 10 years to learn astrology and tarot. I was always attracted to the tarot as a kid, and learning out of books really frustrated me. And then I found myself, fortunately, at this coffee shop right after I graduated college, and this gentleman came in there who's like always dressed in black, and he had a habit of giving the baristas there either a half-hour tarot reading as like their holiday gift or like $5 in a Christmas card. And so he gave me a tarot reading for a couple years because I worked at the coffee shop for several years, became manager there. But he gave me a tarot reading for the first few years, and then he offered or he asked me if I was interested in learning the tarot as a method of self-study. And so I said yes. And so he invited me to draw tarot decks as a way of learning the tarot system and to learn astrology and numerology. And so I did that for 10 years, and also studied other aspects of esoteric studies with him as well. And so that's how I learned astrology and tarot, and I just was recently inspired to start making videos and sharing some of it with people, because I've had some people who know that I read in the past like ask me to start making videos, so here I am. Let me know if you're interested in anything else, and I'll probably make another astrological snapshot on the full moon and keep making the tarot videos as well. I hope you have a blessed night, and if you'd like to look at your chart, just let me know. Blessings to you, and I will see you again soon. Bye.